Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Robert Lehman, I'm the Booking and Artistic Manager at the Cedar, and I just wanted to welcome you to episode number 10 of the Cedar Public Access Channel. In 2019, the Cedar launched the inaugural year of the Artist Collective, where they helped us guide community engagement, as well as curate various different programs. Now in its second year, the artists continue to do that, adapting for a digital space, a space where people have to be more socially distanced, and seeing what community engagement, digital programming look like there. And they also continue to advise us on operations, things that are internal to the Cedar, as well as advising on business as usual practices that we would like to change moving forward. 2020 was an especially meaningful year to have this set of artists as leaders, as we faced a pandemic and continued more widespread calls for racial justice, as well as accountability when it comes to community safety in the music industry and also nonprofit industry at large. This year was an incredible year of co-learning between the organization and the artists, and it will continue to influence our operations for years to come. This conversation will run about 100 minutes, though if you're tuning in on SPNN on channel 15, it'll run a little bit shorter, just to keep within our hour broadcasting slot. If you'd like to access the full program, you can find it on YouTube and Facebook, here and thereafter. During this discussion, artists Ritika Ganguly, Ifrah Mansour, Alexandra Buffalohead, Deeq Abdi, Tou SaiKo Lee, and Lady Midnight talk about what it was like to be an artist on the Artist Collective during 2020. They also talk about what it's like to be an artist in general, how they've experienced this time that 2020 is, and how they've been creating art, how they've been nurturing themselves, and healing others. Some of them discuss programs that they did this year. If you'd like to learn more about those, visit the Cedar Public Access Channel portion of our website. You can also see those programs for free on the Cedar's YouTube and Facebook. If you'd like to learn more about each individual artist, you can find them on various platforms as well. Cedar Public Access Channel is always available for free, with a suggested donation of $10 to help us keep programming running. Know that the artists and the tech team involved have already been paid, so anything that you donate goes directly to the Cedar and helps us continue this type of programming. If you want to contribute and you're able to, you can visit thecedar.org/donate. Lastly, if you want to get in the mood, we encourage you to brew your own cup of tea to sip while the Artist Collective members sip theirs. They'll also be offering up some of their own recipes, so we encourage you to pay attention just in case there's one that you want to try out. All right, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed the program, Tea with the Collective.
All right. Do we want to talk about what's in our teas right now? What teas we brought with us?
Yay, choye. Wait, okay, I said choye. Choye is actually the name for, that's what we call tea in the Hmong language, choye. Choy means medicine. Ye means, I don't know what that means, but it's like yay. But it's not a recognizable Hmong word, but it is a lot of the herbs that are grown naturally in the mountains. But one I know is a healing herb that my grandma used to grow. That's, I don't know what it's called, but so that's one of the ingredients. And then another is like, you know how like there's greens, like the vegetable greens you grow? So like in Southeast Asia, there's a certain type of greens that grows naturally. And then we continue to grow them as something we eat with. And so we combine the herb and the green and we boil it together. And then that's like a tea. And then we will eat the green afterwards. And we'll like dip it into like a really spicy sauce. So it's, you know, so it's spicy, double meaning. And so, so that's kind of an ingredient for a specific tea that some elders make.
I love that. I feel like, I feel like the world eats way less vegetables. Yeah. And like putting vegetables in your tea, that's something I would want to do to my nephew to torment him. Yeah, I'm like, drink your broccoli, I love that.
Tea.
Yeah.
So I was like, I usually make tea at home all the time now, but I bought some Somali tea on the way over here, and me and Tou traded, so it's like a tea cultural exchange thing. But Somali tea is really different depending on where you get it. I got it at the restaurant across the street, and theirs is, Somali tea is generally sweet. It's black tea, and then they add more things to it. This one, by the taste of it, got some ginger, some probably like whole milk, and it's really good. It's warm, and that's usually why I get it. It just kind of warms me up as I go through my day.
I love that. I would like to say I also have Somali tea made at home, but it's not. This is a gentrified, almost dead Somali tea. It's like the ghost of Somali tea is in here. Because the spices I used are an old spice. So for me, like when I make Somali tea, you have to use a very fresh spices, and the spices are like the star. The tea is just like, I don't know, side chick or something like that. And so there's like cardamom, cloves, not ginger. I feel like I'm a ginger hater when it comes to my Somali tea. What else is in there? Elderberries. See, that's like my weird addition. What else is in here? A little bit of lemon, a little bit of sugar. I feel like there's something I'm missing. And whatchamacallit, black pepper. And I feel like, much like you said, every Somali person's tea is different because people use a different combination of spices. And sometimes I feel like there are certain regions in Somalia they're known to have like more gingery Somali tea, or particular areas are known to have more like cardamom Somali tea. Yeah, but the lemon I feel like is, I don't know, like I feel like the Americanized people put lemon, mint, like any other herbs. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I brought watered down tea.
Nice.
Just H2O. Water is life.
It's the base for tea.
But probably my go-to is chamomile, just because I know like sometimes I have stomach issues and it just always helps with my stomach. And then just thinking of like when I was younger having the flu, I don't know if it was my mom's aunties, if they were the ones that said like try muskrat root and like heat that up, and I swear like that helped me. And I remember a teacher getting sick and my mom was like, use the muskrat root. And I feel like I've only seen it in Rapid City, but I'm sure there's other places or people who know where to get it.
How would you prepare the muscat?
You just boil it. It's like a little root, and you just boil it together and then drink it.
How does it taste?
I don't know, like bland. Like
It's
there's
bland,
not a lot
okay.
of flavor, but I remember like not liking it. My mom was like, "Drink it. It's gonna make you feel better." I was like, "Okay, I'll drink it." But you see like the root like sinking in at the bottom, and it looks like a little like tree branch, like kind of, but it's like squishy a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Things that are good for you sometimes are just ugly. You're like, or just hideous looking. You're like, I don't want to.
I am drinking Darjeeling long leaf tea. I feel like I'm a purist when it comes to teas. Like, it cannot be adulterated with anything else. Like, no, I mean, I have a lot of friends and, communities in India. There's as many kinds of tea making in India as people really. Like, there's, just ginger tea. There's all kinds of spices, boiled, overboiled with milk. But true to my Bengali blood, most, Bengalis have a belief that they have been colonized better than the practice of the colonizer.
Oh my
So
God.
it's like, we will make tea better than you do, real tea snobs. But yeah, so anyway, I've had a hard time sourcing Assam long tea or long leaf tea or Darjeeling long leaf tea during the months of the pandemic because the supply chains have kind of been affected. And so I'm being very stingy with how much I make every day. Who knows what would have happened without this tea? So yeah, it's basically just long leaf, cut, curl, twisted. I steep it for 2 minutes in boiling hot water, and then I just drink it and get the flavor of the leaf.
Yeah.
And the stage at which the leaf was harvested. You literally get that flush flavor. So I love it. It's what I offered you, Ifrah, when you came over and you said, this is horrible.
See,
and then I offered you some Minnesota nice tea. It's actually
I was
called
like, this is
Minnesota nice.
great.
And Ifrah was like, my dear, that is tea now.
See, I don't have that purist, conditioning like you do. My colonizers were quick.
So yeah, that's the story of the tea in this cup.
Delicious.
This tea, I actually don't have a name for it. I think it was brought to me at some point when I was sick, and it was named like the Mexican remedy tea, but I'm sure there's another name for it. But essentially, it's just like kind of like a whole head of garlic that you boil along with ginger and then turmeric root. And then you add some lime or lemon with some honey. And it's pretty good. It's kind of a good tea if you have any inflammation in your body, if you're like have an upset stomach, or you're trying to kind of boost your immune system. So I start to drink it in the fall, like sort of changes of seasons, any season really, like spring or winter, summer, just because there's so many allergens. So this is kind of like a good tea to kind of fight anything off preemptively, and then also kind of help you when your immune system is down.
Yeah.
It's good. You don't taste the garlic, I promise.
I mean, that's my follow-up question. I'm like, what are we talking about?
It's sort of
Non-kissable
like
breath
a broth,
afterwards?
like you could put, if you threw some carrots in here, some celery, a soup stack. But if you add a little bit of honey, some lemon, some tea, like it's just some hot water.
Dress it up.
Flavored hot water.
Flavored hot water. That
It's
sounds
good
really
for
healing.
you, yeah.
Yeah. I love that. We've got like garlic drinking, vegetable and tea, exchange, Somali teas, ginger haters, pluralist, imperialist, long tea leaves.
Imperialist.
Yeah, and water is life, period, tea. I love that. Okay. Okay, I'm supposed to ask us our first question, and it's, I guess, I feel like what I loved about our group is that we're just like, we are extremely honest and generous and sharing, and so we wanted like to get the beautiful tea conversation out of the way, but to also like get us started. And I want to invite all of us to just like honestly share how we're really feeling as artists, as Minnesota lovers, and just fully knowing that where we are sitting and all the histories that's happening and the histories that's being unearthed. So for me, like this question was like the question that's probably all in our hearts, not just as artists, but as just creators, as conscious, breathing, living beings. And the question is, how are we surviving as artists, mentally, spiritually, physically, with isolation and with what we have witnessed and have gone through in our own personal ways, as what the world is calling civil unrest. But I think I'm not even okay with that term of like civil unrest. I'm like, it's a civil necessary unrest. Yeah, I said a lot. Is there anything that's coming to mind for you all?
Yeah, it's difficult to even know like what to call the time that we're living in, because I feel like typically things are named after. and we're still like in it, right? Not even really sure what stage, if this really is the beginning, the middle, if we're nearing some type of like shift to the end. So I think that can create a lot of confusion, and it can also create this sense of like, where do I hold, you know, onto, like, where's my foundation, where's like my stability. So I think all of the things that we're going through right now, even if we're not sure what to name it, feels like a falling away.
Yeah.
And I think for myself of how have I personally, like, I can't speak to anybody else, but how have I as an artist individually, like mentally, spiritually, physically, like how have I either protected myself or learned like what the next step is for me. And with that, when I think you have such a shift happening around you, it's important to kind of like center and pull from a space of foundational strength. And one of the good things about like when everything like falls away from you, you know, metaphorically and literally, is that you have to take inventory of like where your strength is, like where your balance is. So for me, I've just been really working on kind of calling in to my center to take inventory of like what are my tools and strengths, and then taking it just the next step from there, so that I'm moving from a place as solidly as I can to not disrupt already the things that are like in motion anymore, if that makes sense. Not to say that there isn't sort of a cause to any effect that I might have, or kind of like a chain reaction, but trying to be as intentional with that from how I know it in my own body and perspective and like mind. Which is also saying a lot too, but y'all know what I mean.
Great.
You feel me?
I think that's really awesome. I resonate with that of like taking inventory, because I feel like I've, in the time of like, especially in Minnesota, like as the seasons change and it becomes fall and like you see snow on the ground, you already, like in general, we all at this time of year, we kind of pull back, we kind of like make sure our home base is in order, or at least like, you know, the place that we're going to spend most of the year in, or like most of that winter in. So I've been doing a lot of that same, is like a lot of like just spending a lot more time in my house, and like I live relatively by myself, so a lot more time by myself, and like, you know, taking inventory of like, what are my strengths and how do I move forward in this time of uncertainty, and you know, can I make plans, and are they, you know, even if I do my part, will the world and what's going on disrupt it, you know? So just I've been doing a lot of that, and I really appreciate you saying like taking inventory and looking inward. And I think that's, as an artist, I think that's an important place to be at the beginning of something, or while you're in the middle of some like big global disrupting event.
I think it's also using our creativity to survive, to adapt. I think being in isolation, it actually reminded me of my first opportunity to creatively express myself, which was in a juvenile institution where I was locked in between walls, and the creativity just came out, you know, and I just became a poet and a hip hop artist at that moment. And I think as I become someone that is involved with community and building with all these different amazing people and communities, I think sometimes I lose that sense of going inside myself and thinking deeply into my creativity and my expression. And in a sense, I adapt in the sense of bringing myself back to that place where I can reset and look deeper into myself and think through the way I create. So that was my initial way of dealing with it.
Oh, I love that. There's definitely a lot of beautiful parallels. And I feel like for me, like at the beginning, I was I was really feeling as the world was kind of like, deciding who's essential and who isn't essential. And I think as an artist, I have gone through of almost like this a depressive state of like, I'm not really essential. My work isn't really essential. My work isn't needed. And I felt like as as racism resurfaced, I do feel like racism never goes away. I felt like I was able to tap into my skills as an artist, as someone. As someone who tries to authentically and honestly stay in the moment, I felt like I leaned into more of my artistic skills, and I was like finally able to get myself out of that depressive state of like, I'm actually useless when the world really is in need. I was able to take like long walks to all the places that have been burned down, the memorial site as well. And I think for me, like I felt like I was having a hard time noticing that when I was really down and I was being picked up by other artists' work. I was listening to Maya Angelou's, listening to all these poets. And I think it was just really interesting to note sort of like how we pull ourselves out of this falling away from, which I really love that metaphor.
I was in the middle of teaching a school residency at Jackson Elementary. And then, the two things happened, the teacher strike, and then COVID happened right after the teacher strike. So we connected because the students didn't get to finish the residency. It's like a spoken word performance residency. And we talked about creating a video, teaching through video, pre-recorded videos. And so I have a lot of friends that are amazing videographers, but because of COVID, and at that point, we were just kind of isolating ourselves. I had to just videotape myself or through my cell phone and then figure out the whole technical process of uploading it or downloading it and getting it onto a file to share with the school. So I think those are just skills that you have to learn and adapt to continue to, be active as a teaching artist. And so I think that was cool. And then using the skill of community building, or not just the skill, but the, how I develop community building, because I can't build as much with other artists unless it's through video conference. We're building with people that want to go biking or people that want to be in nature more. And so I started building community with others that were out there really wanting to connect in that sense, but more in a safer way outside. So when it was warmer weather. So those are things that I thought about as far as me adjusting to survive. Yeah. What has it meant to be on the Artist Collective, which is 6 artists coming together, giving feedback every 2 weeks on the organizational access to support Cedar Cultural Center, but then also doing events and projects on the side, which is supported by the Cedar Cultural Center. So think about it like, wow, your experiences, your ideas, and your inspirations.
Do you guys mind if I start?
Yeah.
Well, it's been quite a year. I think I came in this thing with like a lot of expectations and a lot of excitement. And not that, the excitement kind of fizzled away a little bit, but like the excitement for doing things in general, art related and like performing and bringing people together fizzled out. And I it was exciting, and I felt honored to be a part of it for sure. But I also felt like towards lockdown and when we started like doing Zoom calls, I felt very kind of disattached in some points. And I also like had this grand idea for what I was gonna do for my project, and that had to be scrapped like 20 times over. And so it was really, I think it was really challenging in many ways. And it was, I pictured it being a lot easier to like kind of accomplish some of the goals that I wanted to get done. But it taught me to be a lot more tactful, patient, and like be also just kind of like being able to like land on my feet real quick and like readjust and rechange a couple of things. But it also, it helped me learn just like seeing how an organization functions and like being like, being someone that should provide like my input to an organization that I've, been around and like have come as an audience member to plenty of their shows. It was cool. And to be around other artists that, some I've known for a very long time, some I just met, but a lot of them I've respect their work, and I've seen and went to go see their work as an audience member and as a fan. Yeah, as a fan. And so that's really cool. But I think, this definitely, to be part of this is really special for me. Because it added consistency. Every 2 weeks I knew where I was gonna be. And it's also like just a unique year and a unique time to be part of something like this. So I think it was very humbling, and it was a lot of learning, but it was very enjoyable towards like, I'm kind of sad that this is like the last meeting. I'm not kind of sad, I'm sad.
This is the
That
last
this is
one?
our last
This
meeting.
is
I'm
the
sure I'll
last
see
one?
everybody else
No.
again, but
We
not
got,
what we
we got
heard.
a couple more.
We,
But
I think we have a couple more.
is it?
Yeah. I think I'm gonna say what I love about the Artist Collective is that the opportunity to have access to local artists, because I'm not a musician and I love just being around musicians. So I absolutely loved being around you all. And I think like for me, that being on the Artist Collective meant that here's an organization that opened their doors to artists and said, hey, come dream with us and also show us how we can serve our communities better. And I feel like that's what I loved about all of our perspective projects, because we were all thinking about individuals that the magic that Cedar creates is not reaching, or that person's magical existence is not being shared at Cedar, if that makes sense. So we were like broadening Cedar culture's reach and also bringing on new ideas. Like I keep thinking about your beautiful project and Ritika's project and your perspective projects. For me, like it felt like, and I'm like a double collective. Me and Ritika are like double dippers. Is that what we're called? Triple dippers?
From now on.
From now on.
double dippers.
We are double dippers. As in, we were in last year's, or the inauguration of the Cedar Cultures Collective. And I think I felt like what I was dreaming last year, what I did on Cedar's, I led a project that activated Cedar Cultures Plaza, because I wanted to imagine individuals that wouldn't normally come into the building and consume the beautiful music and concert that happens. I wanted to imagine individuals that, and neighbors, to consume a beautiful cultural art that exists in the plaza, and that art sort of reflecting and celebrating who they are. So I kind of was imagining people who hate music. Literally, I was like, I want to serve the people who don't like music. And we live in a neighborhood that is, there are a lot of individuals that see like music as haram. They wouldn't necessarily want to come in the building, but they love art. These are the individuals who would be making poems on the go. And,
What does haram mean?
Yeah.
What does haram mean?
What does haram mean?
Yeah.
Everyone should know what haram means.
Right? I know, but they,
y'all
it's
know
hard
what
for some
haram
people.
means? Oh, Haram is like prohibited. But you all know what halal means, right? Halal?
Yeah.
Halal food?
Yeah, I do.
You do know what it means, right?
Yes.
Halal, haram's like the opposite.
Okay.
Darn it, I guess we're not educating you all better. I thought we were, because we use that all the time. We're like, haram, haram, which is like prohibited. So I built this hut that lived on a plaza, and the hut was literally like put together every weekend, and some kind of musical community gatherings took place by the hut. And I wanted to specifically create a warming space for individuals that are made to feel shunned, younger individuals that are made to feel shunned because they don't look the Somali part, or they don't fit in the Somali part or the Muslim part. I feel like I felt like I've gotten a lot of warm connection within my own community, because I feel like I already do look like this person who isn't fitting into the Somali image already. The fact that I was co-creating this, cultural hut piece that the community has so much reverence and love for it, I felt like I was able to get these elders that often like shun me and people that look like me to sort of like say, hey, you're all right. And this other person sitting next to you that I've been ignoring for a while is also okay. Which I feel like that's what I love about art, that creates this warming between even people that we think have a beautiful relationship. So I felt like there was this beautiful synergy and connection that happened between elders and like, Muslims and these young boys who were helping me all the time, and myself too. Earlier, an elder literally like wove, because the hut was out there for like almost 6 months. There's an elder who wove an entire like a door covering, and I just saw it right now. It was just so beautiful. I was like, I can't believe you made this for us. And I think what I also, what's the other thing? I think what I knew was happening is that there was already this disconnect that was happening between elders and younger kids. Like I said, due to younger kids not looking the Somali part, and the elders shunning the younger kids for not looking the Somali part, the Somali way of looking. I don't even know what that is. Is there a way of Somali? Yeah, now I'm like just talking million miles. Because I felt like just seeing that rug right now just reminded me of all the warmth that I felt on that plaza, and I was able to like get to say, oh my God, I'm so glad I got to be like part of this, especially when you feel like people need like we so desperately need each other, but the fact that we put like labels and we judge people on how they look, I feel like it's almost like, taking people's like masks that they put on. So I'm talking a lot. I will stop now. But but I think like I felt like I'm just feeling so grateful to the Artist Collective, because I felt like that warmth that I was feeling on the plaza, I was also feeling it with you all as well, because I feel like this is one of the best group of people that I got to spend, a vicious year, which is what 2020 is.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the best word to describe this collective is special. Just having the time to meet together, learn from each other, share. I mean, I almost wish that all organizations or art organizations had this kind of model of paying artists to like educate or co-program things with the arts institution. It's really important and vital, and should be held like to the same level of like board of directors. Yeah, I've just been so grateful for this opportunity, and I hope it will continue in the future.
Yeah. Likewise, I think that the Artist Collective is just such a great thought experiment. And really an institution like the Cedar could pull it off, because it's very hard to change institutional habits. But the Cedar has dreamed of doing that by involving artists, from within the community. And I feel like, why I think it's such a initiative is because, because there's this assumption behind the Artist Collective that power is not something that can be granted to communities. It already exists in communities. It's just about channeling that power, right? So it's not about giving access to power, but really about giving access to this whole community of people who already inherently have that power. And so I think that last year's projects, the 6 projects that we did, last year's cohort, and this year, of course, this year has been a very different story, and we've had a very different energy around, the Zoom meetings. But it's been super productive in I think driving that organizational behavior change that the Cedar started out with. Yeah, and I was just really excited to get access to all the organizational resources to do. To be some kind of a conduit for the artwork of incarcerated artists, who are literally producing from behind bars, and then for that vision to be upheld and uplifted by the Cedar team, that felt really great. Yeah, I really think that it should continue, and the State Arts Board would benefit from funding this again and again. Yeah. I see in this initiative, way of strategizing, and that's what I really like about it. It's a very smart and bold experiment, and I can see through all our projects that it's really helpful for creating all kinds of new audiences, audiences that have never come to the Cedar or would not have had it not been for these projects. So yeah, in that sense, I think it's really.
I agree. Yeah, everything. I concur. I think that what's so interesting about this collective is that it does go with the intent of recognizing that you don't want to impose, it is an institution, and there's going to be problems, or I think inherently, systematically, things that reflect oppression, just because of the nature of institutions and how funding is sourced and access and all of those things. But it feels like with this project, it's recognizing that exists, and it's an attempt to, instead of say, I have all this knowledge that's good for you, that you need, this community that maybe it's not connected to, it's saying, well, we have this space, it's located here. In what ways can this be useful to the community that it's part of? And I think the idea of being able to come to the community as opposed to the community coming to it is a huge, something that I think other organizations should take note of. So I've really appreciated it personally during this time, because it's been really supportive in being able to say, our check-ins where we're so how is everyone? This is maybe the second or third time that we're meeting in person because of the pandemic. And so having that moment to say well, honestly, I don't even know how I'm doing. And I am trying to respond with my old coping mechanisms, and they're not really working, and I'm not really sure how I want to proceed and what's the future of art and presentation and all of these really enormous questions. So being able to process that with other people who are going through it, I think has given a lot of hope, and I think a lot of support for me. And I just have really appreciated the opportunity to grow and to adapt, because things still have to get done. Life still goes on. There's still a responsibility that we all signed up to do. And fortunately, the board of directors and the people funding this project thought that it was important enough to continue and not just like dead it. So I think that's also a testament to kind of like the Cedar's mission, which is to be able to, now I'm probably not going to say it right, but my interpretation of the Cedar's mission, which is to be able to uplift the resources that like uplift the voices of the communities that it's a part of, and doing that through the arts.
Cool. Oh yeah, thank you. And I should answer this too. I think, wait, can we curse? Okay, so I'll just try my best. I think we've been through, this collective, been through a lot of challenges together. I mean, through our experience being here and what happened during, you know, with the pandemic, with the murder of George Floyd. And I think we were in the place to really support each other and to also just share our thoughts, our emotions during that time. And if those incidents, those huge experiences didn't happen, I think it still would have been cool, of course, but I think in a way we bonded through those experiences together. And as artists in leadership positions, I was really inspired by a lot. Like, I don't know if, I think I mentioned it, like when you did, Ifrah, when you did that first episode, that's what inspired me to do my episode. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's cool. I want to do one, you know. And so, and just a lot of the ideas that were exchanged really shaped actually a lot of the programming that I did, that I was involved with through our discussions together. And I was, you know, the scene event too, I was really felt strong about that too, from my own experiences. And I just, for me, it definitely had a very positive impact. I think when we had the conversations about the various organizations and institutions releasing statements after the murder of George Floyd, and then the great people at the Cedar who we were connected with, like Emmy, Robert, David, they want to be authentic. They didn't just want to release a statement. So we had that really honest conversation about not just putting out a statement, but to really represent racial justice and being against police brutality in that sense. And so I think those were the types of conversations that I felt were really strong and really spoke to the authenticity of the Cedar and then the artist collective coming together and them putting that much trust and value in our opinions. You know, I think that was, that was great, and I think that was really important for us. So I definitely want to encourage, a continuation, if it's possible, for more artist leaders in the future to come together and to have this type of collective. And I felt really supported throughout this whole process, whether it's from those from the Cedar, Emmy, well, I should name all of them now, but Emmy, Robert, David, and oh shit, I'm forgetting people now, I'm dead. Okay, so.
That one person we never see.
Yeah, and a lot of people, and I just feel that, no, it definitely will be a memorable experience for me. Even when I announced it initially, when we haven't met each other yet, I thought it was a big deal, because like, I read everyone's bios, and y'all just came with your own very, inspirational experiences that you brought, but to finally meet and exchange those ideas in person, then eventually on video, I always felt like it was an important place, a hub for me. Even though all this chaos was happening, I knew there was this consistent hub I could come back to. We can exchange ideas and support each other. So that was my thoughts on the Artist Collective.
Yeah, I love that we got to have an access to each other, because I do feel like as working artists, we're constantly on the go, right? I'd have to move mountains to get to you, St. Paul, or rivers, St. Paul. So I do feel like I'm even more grateful that we got to have access to each other. I got tea at Snooty People's Tea at Ritika's house. I'm like, the Artist Collective is responsible for that.
It is the conduit.
Yeah, so I guess then the next kind of topic or question is asking us all do you feel motivated to create? Why or why not? And I mean, for me, I think it's just like taking things one day at a time, but I'm just so grateful for all the artists that have been part of like the movement building and just keeping each other up and positive. Yeah, but I mean, personally for me, I feel like it's in waves, but making sure like I'm checking myself that I'm centered and depending on like how I'm feeding myself or being patient or being okay, like if I don't know, do bad things just to like emotionally try and take care of myself, but making sure I'm there for myself, for my family and my community.
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone's in overdrive of like coping mechanisms, and just again, like going back to that idea of like taking inventory, you're becoming really aware of like what you have and what you use and how you use it. And I think probably like, you know, the first 2 weeks, it's like you blow through all your snacks, right? So you're like, okay, this is great. Like I'm set up, but then you realize there's no moderation. So you're like, wow, I really use this coping skill a lot.
Yeah,
like maybe I should open up the toolbox and see what else is there. But I think that like that's always kind of normal for an artist, where we go into these spaces of like hibernation, like introspection, reflection, and then like connection with the rest of the world, and how if that's presenting or if that's receiving, and this kind of like gestational period. And I think like the more you go through it, the more you're able to be aware of like, this is what stage I'm in, you know, like I'm just a larva, and then I'm like, I love analogies, by the way, so you're gonna hear a lot of these, but like, you know, now I'm kind of an amorphous glue, like, you know, and then I'm turning into something else. And I think for me, the idea of like creating, it's not even to say that I don't want to create, but sometimes it's so massive, the thing that's inside of me, that I'm not necessarily sure how to proceed, because like what's happening is in our world right now is a lot to process. And so it would make sense where, you know, if you as artists were reflecting the world that's around us, you know, this is a massive world that we're all kind of tapped into, this hyper consciousness of our mortality, and to be able to translate all of that and then give it out, you know, like we should have grace with ourselves, patience, and I think also this sense of like not having to have everything figured out. So the more that I go back to kind of that trust, that kind of like intuition of the unknowing process of the arts, and like, let's make it exciting, you know, like, I don't know what it's going to turn out to be. Can this become a game? Then I think like that's something that I've developed as a coping mechanism of like how to use art, or even like the idea of the practice of art in processing like what we're going through right now.
I think that I've felt very uplifted by just, you know, seeing examples of how the artist community has changed, expanded, transformed the understanding of creation, like to create, you know, creating what? It's not always an art product or artwork. Creating connections has become a big thing, creating, you know, some kind of a communality around this pandemic, around the racism, you know, anti-racism protests. So really the understanding of the word create and the possibilities that artists have kind of generated in the process, that has been really exciting for me to watch and experience. Artists have been forming coalitions to to create sustainable solutions for themselves so that we are less and less funding dependent and more sort of, self-sustaining as a community, not just our own selves through our own artistic production. So I think that somewhere the nature of the pandemic, this particular pandemic, forces us to look at ourselves as part of this, bigger system of things and bigger, part of a bigger solution, So it's been very exciting to experience that stretching of the word create, yeah.
I think, I already told you that I was protesting on making art at the beginning, and I still feel like I'm protesting on making art because I felt like I just wanted to be with, I just wanted to be with people and sit in the uncomfortableness of this, very painful, unjust world that we live in, and to also notice the things that I unconsciously participate in, whether it is a system that causes harms to other BIPOCs or just noticing. And I think for me, it's been really interesting to take this time as to create sort of a knowledge bank for myself, because I find myself reading a lot more, and also just noticing again the things that I just normally do, and I feel like before COVID I was very hungry to get the paycheck and I'll just do whatever and you can be whatever, and now I feel like I'm okay just sitting and building relationship with the organization first. So I felt like the fact that we were forced to slow down and to think about our existence and our looming immortality, I felt like we're forced to also notice the ways in which we all participate in harmful systems. Yeah.
I feel like that kind of goes into the next question that I want to pose to the group, which is what is the impact of the overall well-being of the arts and community? What impact do the arts have for artists and for non-artists in connection to healthy communities? And yeah, whatever anyone thinks.
I feel like, so I was here yesterday working on part of my project, and I had a couple of people perform on stage, and it was me, my man who's doing the sound, and yeah, it was just us, and it felt really in a way, it felt really healing to be in a place where there's live music, even though I was missing the audience, and we talked about how there's something special about just going to a live event, going to a show. You really there's something spontaneous about it because you never really know what to expect, but people go there for that energy and to be around other people that they normally aren't around, or they're they're not around as much, and they vibe off of each other in that way. And I feel watching all these venues close down and watching everything kind of being moved online is it's taken a toll on the well-being of the community, I feel because especially this coming winter, as a person that went to at least 5 shows a month, maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, that was a thing to do in winter for people. The way for us to see each other was, hey, let's go out and check out the show, and now that's not going to be here. So I feel that happening is definitely affecting the well-being of the community. People not being able to go out and express themselves, dance, that's the other thing. You can't really go dance. That's really a therapeutic thing for some people. So it's definitely affected the well-being of the community. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, it's just like essentially, you know, like art forms connections, and
Yeah.
it gives us opportunity, space to be able to vibrate together in whatever aspect that might be, as like creating together, building something together, or being able to kind of discuss and reflect and look at outside of your perspective. But I wonder too, you know, like, and maybe someone could speak to this kind of like, you know, what are sort of the aspects of reverence, or even I feel like spirituality, or, you know, the other aspects of art and communion, you know, when you're talking about like what creates like well-being and healthy societies, you know, like what role does art play, I guess in that sense as well, not just like the entertainment aspect and like social aspect.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I was actually, when you asked your first question, thinking about how for so many communities in different parts of the world, art is not a discipline that's separate from living. So art is the main mode of engagement with life. Art is political. Art is such a mode of survival. It grows out of, you know, a context of work, out of your everyday occupational work. And so in that sense, you know, art as something that is a source of well-being and healing, it's kind of all meshed in so much with the daily process of living, you know. And equally, there are, you know, the sovereignty of states and governments, you know, they also try to clamp down on this aspect of living. So for communities that will protest through art, or will live their marginalized lives through art, the government will try to clamp down on that, put them away, physically isolate them, exterminate them from society, not as artists, but as people who are critiquing, asking questions through their art, you know. So their status in that community is not of an artist, but really someone who's living their lives, talking about their oppression, talking about their daily circumstances. And so, yeah, so there is, I mean, yes, people are wanting to use art for well-being, and it is helping both artists and non-artists, but there are these, you know, other forces that kind of realize the power of living life through art, and they try to, you know, silence that kind of living, you know, yeah.
I'm thinking about how, like for me, I feel like the beauty of art is that you get to share it with a stranger, much like a concert, much like, you know, a comedy show. The fact that you're laughing and all these other people are laughing, I feel like that's where the juice of like healing lives. And I do feel like that is what we are hungry for. I recently saw a show that was done on a part on on the outside, and the audio, it was very difficult to hear the artist under their talking with their mask, and I was really far away. But the fact that I got to see it live, I felt like, you know, there is no amount of, you know, beautiful cameras that will ever replace that. The fact that, and also being around these other strangers that you get to witness with the art. I feel like that is the beauty of the art. The fact that you get to, it's a communal thing, and the art facilitates this like communal human connectiveness, especially when we are desperate for connection, as I feel like the world gets better on disconnecting us, and making us believe that we are all like inherently different with that, which I think is like the whole racism. Now I feel like I'm getting like really metaphor. Like I feel like the things that I miss that art gave me is the fact that I got to laugh with a stranger or connect with a stranger. and see the artist in person. And I do one, and also I do feel like art facilitates this beautiful incidental connection and inspiration for the next generation. Like, I found my art passion because I saw like what is it? I saw one play that has impacted me for the rest of my life, and that's where I said, I was like, I don't want to be a teacher, I want to be an artist, just like that. So I do wonder about the next generation and the fact that all the young people, there is a lot of beautiful art that's being made right now, but it's all digital, right? And you are consuming the art, maybe by yourself in your cocoon. I do wonder how the next creators are impacted by this like individually consumed art.
Like how many more serendipitous epiphanies
Yes.
as are like will people experience that's gonna inspire this path of theirs?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really hopeful because I feel like when I was younger, just like seeing that there were like racist mascots, and like now like within the summer that like the Washington football team changed their name, and people have been fighting that since like the 1970s. So I feel like, yes, we're like disconnected, but social media and the art has like this huge impact on messaging around specific movements, and it's been an incredible time to witness that, from like murals to you name it.
I love that.
I wanted to speak to the spiritual aspect of your question. And my grandmother was a healer as well as a poet, like a Hmong poetry chanter. So one thing I experienced was, I saw when I was living in a village in Thailand, a Hmong village, was an elder grandmother came out and started performing her poetry chanting, and just like in the middle of her garden with no audience, right? And I was just thinking, I asked my friend who was her grandson, and he said, oh, she's healing from a past trauma, right? So she's using her poetry to heal, and it got stuck with me because now as we grow up here in the United States, we see it more as a form of art as a form of entertainment, and that artists are, Hmong people that pursue arts are like outsiders, or outside the box. But when you go back to the village, it was like a part of everyday life, which is something that Ritika spoke to. And so the process for Grandma, she told me that her process to become a healer was she got really sick and she had to learn how to heal herself first, and then she could heal others, right? So then I think a lot of artists, well, I can't speak for all artists, but many that I know of, including myself, we used our arts to heal ourselves first before we started performing for others and trying to share that with others. And it goes back to that process. So one thing that significant that came out of that was during the time of COVID at its height, where people were really isolated, they did this concert called the Heal Hmong concert, which was artists from all over the world. And I think everybody felt a sense of healing, like we were going back to the original purpose of why we were doing our art, which was to heal, And so it was fitting that it was called the Heal Hmong concert. And so, I just think of it that way, yeah, like from a healer, shamanic, as well as a creative perspective. Yeah.
That's just really beautiful, like the in-between of the idea of like art can heal, but then also art can harm.
Yeah.
And having the power to impact us in such a significant way,
Yeah, and I love that it took a vicious virus to help us, to remind us of what's really important, and like going back to our roots. I'm trying to read like Somali poems that were created in like the early the early 90s, and they're in this like rich Somali words that I can't even say. And these poems, when they were first created, they were orally created, and now they're written, and it's completely different. But then when I try to understand the meaning, the poems are mostly prayers. The poems are mostly like urging, different individuals to see themselves within. It's like, I see you, see me, like when I try to make sense. And I love that we are, we're, we're sort of like reclaiming the original purpose of the art, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I feel like this is kind of a deep question, so we can kind of go around if everybody wants to touch on it, because we're all living through it, and it's a time of uncertainty. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. You know, as an artist, what does it feel like to live in a divided country? You know, and like how, and but maybe I'll add this, and like how can you help, you know, heal this divisions and like maybe bring people together?
Yeah, I think it brings us back to probably that same question of like the role of the arts and the artist, particularly the artist. And I don't know if that role really does change. I think it might have different effects on like the individual depending on what they felt their individual purpose was with their art anyways. Because I think that regardless, but especially in times of division, an artist's role is to be honest, you know, honest with themselves, honest with what they're producing. It's to be able to look at things from a different perspective and to offer that to other people if they're choosing to share their art. It can be things that either bring us together or honestly help us to look more critically in the other direction. And I think that there are ethical responsibilities that exist regardless, whether or not people want to take those into consideration. So I think more so it goes into the idea of like, what are your values and what is your individual purpose? And only you can really know that and take inventory. And part of that comes with being able to know where you stand and heal the things that need to be healed before you just produce things that may not be ethical in the world.
I've been thinking about like what artists did in the past, not only to survive and thrive, but to also leave an archival and authentic legacy. What is it of the moment? And I just looked up a quote by Maya Angelou, since she was beautifully my therapist. And it's this quote that says, I will write on the pages of history what I want them to say. I will be myself. I will speak my own name. And it just makes me think about like 100 years from now, whatever I create this moment, and how honest I am being and authentic. How will that be used in the future and seen? Because I do feel like when I want to research the past, I always look onto artists' work, because I feel like they will be the ones who would be the most honest and authentic in that moment. And for me, I've just been thinking deeply about that, and also thinking about maybe the best art or thing I can do right now is to be authentically present in the moment, to do these like long walks, to really check in with friends, and to really just notice even the things that I have have not noticed before. And then, like, for me, like, the question, like, I feel like I try my best not to look at America as a divided country, but I do feel like it's a country that has a love affair of fear. And like a very fresh incident of racism is that where I live, a place that I lived for almost 5 years, a neighbor came out and started taking pictures of a Lyft driver that was waiting for me. And the Lyft driver happened to be an African American, adorable, sweet old lady. And my neighbor is white. And I'm like, and my neighbor is basically acting on as if she's been living under a rock and not living on basically the birthplace of the latest racism, whatchamacallit city. And it almost, so I think about how everyone is being alone with their fears and just festering with that fear, and that fear continuing individuals to rob of their humanity, if that makes sense. And I'm trying, I feel like as an artist, I'm like, I just want to authentically to be there for that and notice it and name it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That quote is, I feel like, really important. And I mean, I think the land that we stand on in this country has been divided for hundreds of years since it's built on genocide. And I feel like art and music is a way to educate and bring people together, to not be divided. And with the quote, like, I think of like who controls the narrative, and I think we've been seeing more lately Indigenous, BIPOC people, artists, being able to share their narratives, and I think that's really important. And to have an opportunity for us to be here, I feel really fortunate and honored to be here with you all.
Yeah, I do. I have an answer. I'm not saying we need to sing Kumbaya or anything as far as bringing people together, you know.
What? We're not going to hold hands?
But these are my thoughts about art suggesting the divided country piece. Because I think because we're in these spaces, we see artists as truth tellers, as raising awareness, as really holding those accountable that are corrupt, right? But I don't know. I do a lot of research on the opposition, or people that have different views than I. And they were actually artists that were on the more, like on Trump's side, you know? They were artists on Trump's side that were creating for that type of values and that type of perspective too, you know? And I was thinking about it in the sense of they're creating their own, I guess they're trying to use art in their own way, right? To gather more people towards that perspective. And then in a sense, we could be creating in a very similar way. But I think that I also see arts as a way of mediation, because it's not weird, but an interesting, something interesting that happened recently was I've been doing a lot of research on Republicans that have turned on Trump, or that say, oh, okay, he's gone too far. And even though they have conservative views, they're calling out some of the way that he's been, his character and the way he's been treating people as they drew their own line, right? And I was thinking, oh, you know, but I also see it as, you know, as time passes, you know, because they were formerly supporting him, the truth eventually comes out. And then those artists that have been telling the truth from the beginning, that starts to make sense to those people, you know? And so I feel like truth-telling is important, but I think at the same time, we as artists could be conscious about who we could push away if we're going too hard on individuals that could be influenced, right? but then we also want to hold those accountable that are, through that truth telling. So hopefully this makes sense, but I just thought it was really interesting, and I think that even my own family members or friends that may have different views than I, I've seen them change, even though we have conflicting views, and I have a stance, and I create art to really strengthen and inspire this stance, that as time passes and they have a better understanding of what's going on, they start to see that what I've been doing kind of makes sense to them also, and I like to see that growth in people. And so I think that's what art can also do, is really influence people that may be on the fence, or maybe they do have a good character or value in them, but they're just at that point they're influenced by that rhetoric at the time. And so, so that's kind of my viewpoint on the whole division.
Art is power, and I feel like with that power comes great responsibility. Dun, 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 dun.
It does, yeah. And there's definitely, I think what you were saying is, or from what I interpreted of what you just shared, was that role of understanding the purpose sort of your art. And you might not necessarily know why you're making the thing that you're making, but if you're coming from a place of authenticity, even if you don't know the destination, it's going to resonate and reflect maybe imagining a future world. But recognizing where is the place that you're coming from, and then who follows, because now you've given them hope, or you've given them something tangible, an image, a visual to then move towards or to hold dear. So sometimes that function can produce, results that either radicalize us or show us that we have more common ground and bring us together. And I guess there's that question of, is that the artist's responsibility, or is their art just to make the work? And what happens, happens. That was not a question on the thing, but...
Yeah, no, I think that also segues into the next question beautifully. What do you all think about, does the role of art change in a time of crisis? Does the responsibility of art change in a time of crisis, or does it not? I feel like, the word crisis has been used so much to refer to the last 9 months of the pandemic. It almost makes us overlook the longer periods of crises in other people's lives, for whom, for many years and generations, it's been in existence in crisis. So, so I feel like, does the role of art change for people who are experiencing a crisis versus not?
I do feel like when the way art is consumed in the Western world is that it often falls into entertainment, right? What is it? We all have been booked on at the beginning of fancy events, and the reason we're there is to get people excited about something, right? And I do feel like, but we come from worlds, or exist in worlds, where art is a healing, where art is a communal thing, where art is the main course of the meal, not an appetizer, and certainly not an entertainment. I do feel like, as I was feeling really low and sort of useless to the world, the people who were picking me up were other artists. And I do feel like, because I keep thinking about this notion of what is it? Okay, the notion is flying away from me. I think I lost my train of thought. Come back to me.
I feel like for me, the role of an artist and the artist that I look up to is to encourage, to heal, to like help me kind of like, you know, to have fun as well. But like a lot of the art that I use and the, you know, I like to buy paintings and stuff, but I think the one medium of art that I consume the most is music. And that a lot of that music, I think music changes for me as I like go through my emotions and like the music that I've been listening to lately has been like more of like encouraging music and like positive, uplifting music that like helps soothe that. And I think the role of an artist is to like kind of soothe humanity in a way, whether it's with painting or music or like your voice or, you know. And I don't think in time of crisis that role or responsibility changes. I think we have to find a way to adapt and like still provide and deliver that, you know, that healing that people need and want. And I think a great example of it is like how within like 10 to 15 days of lockup, there was thousands of things that showed up where it was like this versus that, you know, like live concerts, this and that. It was like musicians took a couple of weeks off and we're like, how do we readapt to this new environment? And then they brought it back out with, you know, new adaptability. So I think our role and responsibility doesn't change. I think our ability to adapt is challenged, and some people continue to do their art and others kind of falter off maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted to answer that question with some things that Ifrah was saying earlier around like, am I essential? And what are the essentials or the basics that need to be covered, especially in times of crisis where we're looking at our survival. And that even comes up with the question is, even with funding, of like, where do we put our resources when they are finite and when there are very real needs to be able to kind of like protect and care for communities that are under attack and under unbelievable stress. And that reminds me of other comments that were made earlier around the intrinsic value of art, and that in some societies it isn't a commodity that's separate from everyday life. It's something that's woven into the fabric of our existence. In crisis, it feels like there's an opportunity that we don't always see. And I think, of course, you're going to go into fight or flight. You have to kind of, your body's going to do the things that it needs in order to like make it through to the next day. But I think that the way that art can help support that is being able to, even going back to what Deeq was saying, the process of imagination, of having to adapt. And if we look more at art as a way of finding solutions and of living and of something that is critical to our survival, we wouldn't see it as something that doesn't need to be nourished or doesn't need to be accounted for in this time of like great need or crisis, that idea. So I agree with a lot of the sentiments around like, it's not necessarily that it changed, it just heightens in another like form. Like you're using the processes of making art, which comes from maybe like an impulse of feeling. Maybe you don't even have the name for it. It's called anxiety, or it's called depression, or it's called, but you're like, I have to do something. You don't know what's going to come out. There's an unknown. There is kind of like a trust, a fear, and doing it anyways in order to get to that outcome. And the more that you can kind of look on your truths and what you're coming with, I think like the better the outcome that's going to reflect something that you can grow with, because it has something that has roots, as opposed to regurgitating things that have like no, like, you know, the old standard, the oligarch, you know, the things that have taken over that really no longer serve us. So if you're looking at your survival, recognizing like, what do I need in order to get to that place, and using art as a way to help you get to what has yet to be like instated or yet to be created. Yeah.
I'm thinking back to, I feel like the need for the art has not changed. If not, there's even more need for the arts now, as we are, we find ourselves like confined in our small worlds, and some of us might be festering with more fear. But I do feel like we do live in this Western world where the art is a separate thing. It's a separate secular thing, where I do feel like the world, or our world, or the arts world has completely shut down and canceled artists. And I do feel like there were artists that are on the verge of homelessness, that have become homeless. And I think about them, and as I think about and meditate on, has the role of the arts changed during a crisis? And for me, like, I do feel like it has, because the world already has very low value for an artist. It makes me think about, and I do feel like that's just capitalism, right? Capitalism just puts everyone on a value rubric or a list. And I do feel like the artists were one of the first people to go out, so are their livelihood. So for me, like, I keep imagining asking an artist to create when they don't have an income, or that next paycheck, or all the next paychecks are gone, and just sitting with that. Yeah, I've just been sitting with that. Yeah.
Yeah. You already said it, so. But I was just gonna say, it doesn't change necessarily. It gets heightened, and it is kind of off of some of what y'all said, and there's people start to see it more, or to lean towards it, to want to see more of it, or to want to see it as a value. And during these times, so then going back to how it's not valued when it's not time of crisis as much, that hopefully we can leverage that after these times to really support artists, and to really put more value into artists and the roles they play. So.
I want to offer an example of how art is created, also like how art responds to crisis. And recently I was part of a project that is being facilitated by the Indian Collective, and it's a musical project, a mixtape that has two different artist activists who are kind of organizing and curating it, Natani Means and Antone Edwards. And they brought artists together to create a land back mixtape, which is to kind of, help further the efforts of land rights, of sovereign First Nations, to be able to bring awareness to what is happening with so many broken treaties, trespassing of property during like lockdowns for COVID safety, the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And this project, is something that is is coming out of a responsive crisis. But I think how, in one of the examples that art can kind of like help us look at creating solutions or even a new system, was working with a fellow local musician. His name is Tou SaiKo Lee. He created a song for that mixtape that was literally talking about what if the land was already back, not even talking about the process of where we are fighting, but we've already got it. Like if we can't describe it, if we can't paint that picture and what it's going to make us feel like, we're not going to be able to fight for it. We're not going to be able to recognize it when we have it, or even to know. So being able to come from imagine a place of triumph already, and feeling like embodying that now, I think like how important and essential the art of like the work of an artist is to be able to like even manifest that, for people to have that space, to not just be within fight or flight, to be able to have a moment to dream and grow and, you know, like hope and manifest it, you know, all of those things. So I just wanted to share that example of being able to create work in crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the possibility of actually imagining that alternate world into being, right? What would that feel like, look like? Yep.
I love that because I do feel like that's what, like, the vehicle of capitalism is, that it says, you need this, you don't have this, pay for it. And also, you're important, but you're not important, but you can become important if you do all of this for free. So I love that with artists is we're able to imagine this abundant future, and we imagine as actually having all the things that are being denied to us. That's what I love about like researching and like learning about old Somali poems that I can't even like read and understand, because it just makes me think about what has our past or our ancestors have put in place for us to be in this imagined world. Because I do feel like our ancestors have manifested, you know, some of these blessings that we have. The fact that we have artists that are still imagining, you know, a better future, even when their livelihoods are, you know, even their immediate needs are not met. And yeah, it's just been really, really powerful, I guess, to exist in our very like contradicting city where you see a lot of like indigenous beings on the highways, and then our stupid city still has, you know, money to do a giant construction, and then I'm like, you know, as an artist, you're still like expected to imagine. Now I feel like I'm just like going on of how much I don't like Minneapolis and all the stupid things we're doing, but we'll just pause. But thanks to edit.
I think it's really important what you're saying, this whole idea of you're essential, you're not essential. Mm-hmm. We saw this really being lived out, you know, when we hit that peak in, well, the peak of the pandemic is now, but then I remember like earlier on when doctors were pretty much responsible for deciding, well, you can be put on the ventilator and you cannot, because you have a greater chance of living and your life will be of more value if we were to preserve your life. But this life we are concluding as, you know, a life not that important. So ventilators are scarce, and so we will do that rationing, you know, that budgeting. So it's really important how, it's important to see how this is both a condition of the pandemic, like the capitalism, the structure, this whole rubric that you're talking about is both the condition of the pandemic, you know, things got bad because of that, but it's also a sign of where we are, you know, that it's pretty much at the hands of the doctors to decide, well,
Yeah.
this is important and this is not, you know.
I also
your life
keep-
has value, your life
Yeah.
has not.
I also keep imagining all the immigrant parents that are calling their artist children. They're like, I told you now, look at you. You're non-essential. Your brother doctor is essential, you know?
Right.
Yeah. But yeah.
But then you can say, like, that's my poster, and, you know, the protest right there that got shared around the world, or that's my song that I wrote, you know, that they're chanting
Yeah.
as they're fighting, you know, for our rights. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Your parents can say a lot of things.
It's a hard sell, Adriana. It's, yeah.
My was that Hmong concert. I was in that concert, and it had, because of refugee resettlement, you know, we have artists from all over the world, different countries, and so when I performed and my parents saw me on there, my dad he said, my son is not a loser. Hey, actually, that's a big compliment. That's a huge compliment, you know, because, you know, they saw the artists as I don't think he saw me as a loser, but you know, they didn't see it as a viable and form of profession or what I do. But I think it really but it took being in a time of crisis and seeing that for it to be valued in that way, you know. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that.
That's a beautiful immigrant. Like, I feel like that's one immigrant parent satisfied. A billion more immigrants to go. Because my dad, like at the beginning, I was like, Dad, I'm not canceled. It's rescheduled. And then after, I was like, No, Dad, it's not rescheduled. It's postponed indefinitely. Should we close it out?
Yeah.
With,
or unless someone else had some.
Oh, we were drinking tea and we didn't even toast.
Oh,
Wait, do we toast? Are we anti-toast? How are we feeling about toasting these days?
I don't know how I feel about toasting with an empty cup.
I can toast with an empty cup.
Yeah. Do you want to
that bad
say
luck?
something?
Oh, is that bad
prior?
luck?
I don't know. No, it's not. It's a prop.
Okay. Well, I do feel like there were two powerful things that, was it two? There are a bunch of powerful things, but we didn't do the land acknowledgement.
It's okay. You don't always have
You
to
don't
do
have
it.
to always have to do it, okay.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we can acknowledge that we're okay. Well, it's weird that I'm saying it because I'm Dakota, but that we're. It's okay, I think, to close. But acknowledging that this recording is taking place on Dakota land and that Minnesota is like home to current Dakota people and Anishinaabe people, Ho-Chunk, and tons of other nations that call Minnesota home. And I hope that the Cedar continues to engage with First Nations artists, musicians, hire staff, and BIPOC, Black, Latinx, Asian, BIPOC. Now I have to go through the whole thing.
That one person we're always not thinking about.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like that is the best.
Yeah. To the next
What?
collective.
To the next
To
collective.
the next collective.
Is there going to be a next collective?
There has to be.
There has to be.
To the next collective.
There shall be another collective.
There shall be another collective. I love that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now
Thank
we're
you.
off the record.
Appreciate you all.